The bridge of the stellar dawn hummed quietly as Captain Zixtal watched the main screen. His crystal body sparkled under the ship's lights as he studied the small blue planet below. Earth, the humans called it. For 30 years, his people had been watching this strange world and the creatures that lived on it. "Captain, we are getting a signal," said Dr. Melandra from her water tank near the communication station. Her blue skin glowed as she worked the controls with her webbed hands. "It appears to be a distress call." Engineer Koss clicked his mandibles together, a sign of worry among his insect-like people. "From where, Doctor?" "Korath Prime, Melandra," replied, her voice filled with concern. "A human ship has crashed on the moon's surface." The bridge fell silent. Every member of the crew knew about Korath Prime. It was a death world, a place where even the strongest galactic warriors feared to go. The moon orbited a gas giant in the outer system, and its surface was covered with toxic forests and deadly creatures. Most dangerous of all were the Shadow Maw, massive predators that had killed every explorer foolish enough to land there. Humans? Koss buzzed with his wings. Those soft little creatures from the third planet? What were they doing, so far from their homeworld? Captain Zixtal turned his crystalline head toward the communication station. "Play the message, Doctor." The speakers crackled to life with static. Then a human voice came through. It was rough and filled with pain, but still strong. "This is Jake Martinez of the exploration ship New Horizon. My engines are dead, and life support is failing. If anyone receives this message, please know that humanity tried to reach the stars. Tell them we made it this far." The message repeated several times before cutting to static. Captain Zixtal stared at the screen showing Korath Prime. The moon looked peaceful from space, but he knew better. Its purple surface hid forests of killer plants and creatures that could tear through metal with their claws. "Captain," Melandra said softly, "we should report this to Galactic Command. Perhaps they can send a rescue team. By the time help arrives, the human will be dead," Koss pointed out. "Nothing survives on Korath Prime for more than a few hours. The Shadow Maw will find him quickly." Captain Zixtal thought about the humans he had observed over the years. They were strange creatures, these bipedal mammals from Earth. They had no natural armor, no claws or fangs, no poison or special abilities. They seemed so weak compared to other species in the galaxy. Their technology was primitive, barely capable of spaceflight. Most of his crew considered them little more than clever animals. But something about them fascinated him. They were different from other species. Where most creatures would give up when faced with impossible odds, humans seemed to fight harder. They had survived ice ages, global wars, and natural disasters that would have wiped out weaker species. Still, Korath Prime was different. It was a world designed to kill. "Set course for Korath Prime," the captain ordered. "Sir?" Koss's compound eyes widened. "We cannot land on that moon. It is far too dangerous." "We will not land," Zixtal replied, "but we can observe. I am curious to see how long this human survives. It will be valuable scientific data." Dr. Melandra looked uncomfortable in her water tank. "Captain, should we not at least try to rescue him? Our shields could protect us long enough to beam him aboard. And risk our entire crew for one primitive creature?" Koss clicked angrily. The human chose to explore dangerous space. He must face the consequences. Captain Zixtal considered this. It was true that regulations forbade risking galactic cooperative vessels for non-member species. But his scientific curiosity was stronger than his caution. "We will observe first," he decided. "If the opportunity presents itself, we may attempt rescue. But I want to study how humans react to extreme danger." The stellar dawn changed course toward the outer system. As they traveled, the crew monitored Earth's communication networks, trying to learn more about the lost human. Jake Martinez was 28 years old, a former soldier who had become an engineer. He had volunteered for humanity's first deep space exploration mission, leaving Earth's solar system in a small ship designed for short-range scouting. "Foolish," Koss muttered as he read the human's file. "Sending one person alone into unknown space. Most species would send an entire fleet." "Humans are different," observed Dr. Melandra. They seem to value individual achievement over group safety. It is a strange trait. Captain Zixtal studied the data about Jake Martinez. The human had served in his planet's military for 6 years, fighting in several conflicts. His record showed numerous commendations for bravery and tactical thinking. Still, Korath Prime was not a human battlefield. It was a world where bravery meant nothing and tactics were useless against creatures that could phase through solid matter. 3 hours later, the stellar dawn arrived at Korath Prime. The moon hung in space like a purple jewel, beautiful and deadly. Long-range scanners quickly located the wreckage of the human ship near the edge of a vast fungal forest. The crash site showed significant damage, with pieces of metal scattered across several hundred meters. "Life signs?" asked the captain. "One human, still alive," Melandra reported. "He appears to be moving around the crash site. Vital signs are stable but elevated." "Probably panic," Koss suggested. Most species panic when they realize they are about to die. But as they watched their screens, Jake Martinez did not seem to be panicking. Instead of running or hiding, he was moving systematically through the wreckage. He gathered supplies, examined damaged equipment, and began building something from the scattered pieces. "What is he doing?" wondered Dr. Melandra. Captain Zixtal leaned forward, his crystal body refracting the light from the screens. "I believe," he said slowly, "he is preparing to survive." Jake Martinez opened his eyes slowly. His head pounded and his left shoulder felt like it was on fire. The smell of burned electronics and something sweet and rotten filled his nose. He was lying on the cold metal floor of what remained of his ship's cockpit. He sat up carefully and looked around. The New Horizon was completely destroyed. The front section where he had been sitting was the only part still in one piece. Through a large crack in the hull, he could see purple light filtering in from outside. The air tasted strange, even through his damaged helmet. Jake checked his suit's systems. Life support was working, but the battery showed only 18 hours remaining. The communication system was dead. His emergency beacon was broadcasting, but he had no way to know if anyone could hear it. He stood up and walked to the crack in the hull. Outside, he saw a world unlike anything he had ever imagined. The sky was a deep purple color, and 2 small suns hung low near the horizon. Strange trees that looked more like giant mushrooms covered the landscape as far as he could see. Some of them glowed with soft blue and green lights. The gravity felt heavy, making each step harder than normal. Jake estimated it was about 30% stronger than Earth's gravity. His muscles would have to work harder here, but his military training had prepared him for worse conditions. Jake went back inside the wreckage and began gathering supplies. He found his survival pack, a toolkit, some food and water, and several pieces of equipment that might be useful. His service pistol was still in its holster, though he only had 2 clips of ammunition. As he worked, Jake noticed movement in the forest outside. Something large passed between the mushroom trees, but it moved too quickly for him to get a good look. He made a mental note to be very careful when he left the ship. Above him, the crew of the Stellar Dawn watched everything through their scanners. "Remarkable," said Dr. Melandra, as she observed Jake's methodical approach to his situation. "Most species would be paralyzed with fear by now. This human appears to be quite calm." "It will not matter," Koss replied with a dismissive click. "No amount of calmness will help him when the Shadow Maw find his scent. I estimate he has perhaps 6 hours before they locate him." Captain Zixtal watched Jake examine each piece of equipment carefully. "He moves like a soldier," the captain observed. "See how he checks every corner before moving, how he tests each item before deciding to keep it. This one has training." Jake finished gathering supplies and looked at the forest outside. He knew he could not stay in the crashed ship. The hull breach made it impossible to maintain life support for long, and the wreckage would be easy for predators to find. He needed shelter, and he needed it quickly. Jake put on his pack and climbed through the hull breach. The moment his boots touched the purple ground, he felt the difference. The soil was spongy and seemed to move slightly under his weight. The air was thick and humid, filled with spores that made his helmet's filters work harder. He began walking toward a cluster of smaller mushroom trees about 200 meters away. Each step was careful and quiet. Jake had learned in the military that staying alive in hostile territory meant being invisible until you were ready to fight. As he walked, Jake studied his surroundings. The mushroom trees were enormous, some reaching 50 meters high. Their stems were covered in what looked like thick bark, but Jake could see it moving slightly, as if the trees were breathing. Strange sounds came from the forest, clicks, whistles, and low growls that reminded him of no animal from Earth. Something moved in his peripheral vision. Jake froze and slowly turned his head. About 30 meters away, a creature the size of a large dog was watching him from behind one of the smaller mushroom trees. It had 6 legs, purple fur, and eyes that glowed yellow in the dim light. Jake stayed perfectly still. The creature sniffed the air and took a few steps closer. Jake could see rows of sharp teeth in its mouth and claws that looked like they could cut through metal. This was clearly a predator, but it seemed curious rather than aggressive. After a few minutes, the creature lost interest and wandered away. Jake waited another 5 minutes before continuing toward his destination. "Interesting," said Captain Zixtal aboard the Stellar Dawn. The human recognized a hunting situation and responded appropriately. Most species would have either run or attacked immediately. "He is still going to die," Koss insisted. "That was only a scratcher, one of the smaller predators. Wait until he encounters something truly dangerous." Jake reached the cluster of smaller mushroom trees and found what he was looking for: a natural cave formed by several large tree roots growing together. The opening was small enough to defend, but large enough for him to work inside. He crawled in and examined the space. The cave was about 3 meters deep and 2 meters wide. The walls were formed by thick, fibrous roots that felt solid under his hands. Most importantly, it had only one entrance. Jake had learned that the best defensive positions were ones where enemies could only attack from one direction. Jake spent the next hour preparing his new shelter. He used pieces of metal from his ship to create a barrier near the entrance, leaving just enough space for him to crawl through. He set up his remaining electronics to monitor the area outside. Then he began working on weapons. His pistol would not last long with only 2 clips of ammunition. Jake used his toolkit to modify pieces of ship debris into spears and knives. He created a sling from his parachute cord and gathered small rocks for ammunition. Every piece of equipment became part of his survival plan. As the purple suns began to set, Jake heard new sounds from the forest. Howls and roars echoed between the mushroom trees, much louder and more frightening than the daytime noises. Night was coming, and with it, the real predators would emerge. Jake checked his weapons one more time and settled in to wait. He had survived his first day on this alien world. Now he had to survive the night. "The human has created a defensive position," observed Dr. Melandra. "He seems to understand that this world becomes more dangerous after dark." "It will not be enough," said Koss. "The night hunters on Korath Prime can smell fear from kilometers away." Captain Zixtal studied the readings from their scanners. Jake's heart rate was elevated but steady. His breathing was controlled. Most telling of all, his brain activity showed focus and determination rather than panic. "I do not think this human feels fear the way we understand it," the captain said quietly. In his cave, Jake Martinez listened to the growing sounds of the night and smiled grimly. He had been in worse situations before. At least here, he knew exactly what he was fighting for: his life. Jake woke up as the first purple sun began to rise. He had slept in short periods throughout the night, waking every hour to listen for sounds outside his cave. The night had been filled with terrible noises, growls, screams, and sounds he could not identify. But nothing had found his hiding place. He crawled out of his shelter and looked around. The forest looked different in the morning light. Several of the smaller mushroom trees near his cave had been damaged during the night. Deep claw marks cut through their thick stems, and some had been knocked over completely. Jake examined the claw marks carefully. They were huge, each one as long as his hand and cut deep into the tough tree bark. Whatever made these marks was much larger and more dangerous than the small creature he had seen yesterday. As he studied the damage, Jake noticed something else. The claw marks formed a pattern around his cave. The creature had been circling his position, testing his defenses. It had found his hiding place but had not attacked. Jake wondered why. Above him, the crew of the Stellar Dawn had watched the entire night. "Captain, you need to see this," Dr. Melandra said, her voice filled with concern. "The Shadow Maw found the human during the night." Captain Zixtal looked at the scanner readings. "But the human is still alive. Why did it not attack? I believe it was testing him," Engineer Koss said with a nervous click of his mandibles. "Shadow Maw are intelligent hunters. They study their prey before striking." The captain studied the thermal images from the night. The massive heat signature of the Shadow Maw had circled Jake's position for over an hour. The creature was enormous, at least 4 meters long and 2 meters tall. Its body temperature suggested it was warm-blooded and very active. "Show me the footage of the human during the encounter," Zixtal ordered. The screen displayed Jake inside his cave during the night. While the Shadow Maw circled outside, Jake had remained perfectly still. His heart rate had increased slightly, but he showed no signs of panic. Most remarkably, he had not tried to hide deeper in the cave or make any noise that might provoke an attack. He knew it was there, the captain said with amazement. The human knew a predator was testing his defenses, and he responded by doing nothing. That takes incredible discipline. Down on the surface, Jake continued his investigation. He followed the claw marks away from his cave and found more evidence of the night visitor. Footprints in the soft ground showed 4 large paws with retractable claws. The creature walked on its toes like a cat, but the prints were much larger than any earth animal. Jake also found something else that interested him. In several places, the footprints seemed to fade away and then reappear several meters later. It was as if the creature could become invisible or walk through solid objects. Jake had heard stories about creatures like this from other soldiers. Some alien worlds had predators that could phase in and out of normal space. The ability made them nearly impossible to fight with conventional weapons, but Jake was not planning to fight conventionally. He spent the morning creating more weapons and traps. Using his engineering knowledge, Jake built simple snares from his parachute cord and metal pieces from his ship. He placed them along the paths the creature had used during the night. Jake also began working on a special project. He took apart his suit's communication system and combined it with parts from his emergency beacon. The device he created would emit a high-frequency sound that might interfere with the creature's phasing ability. While he worked, Jake noticed he was being watched. Small creatures moved through the forest around his camp, keeping their distance but clearly curious about the strange newcomer. Jake ignored them as long as they did not threaten him. The Stellar Dawn's crew watched Jake's activities with growing amazement. "What is he doing?" asked Dr. Melandra. "Those primitive traps cannot possibly stop a Shadow Maw." "He is not trying to stop it," Captain Zixtal realized. "He is trying to understand it. Look at the placement of those snares. They are not meant to kill. They are meant to provide information." Engineer Koss studied the human's work more carefully. "The traps will tell him when the creature approaches and from which direction. And that device he is building." "What about it?" the captain asked. "If I am reading the energy signatures correctly, it produces sound waves at frequencies that might disrupt phasing abilities. How could a primitive human know about such things?" Captain Zixtal was beginning to suspect that humans were not as primitive as they appeared. "Perhaps we have underestimated this species." Jake finished his preparations as the second sun reached its highest point. He had turned his small camp into a complex network of early warning systems and defensive positions. More importantly, he had begun to understand his enemy. The creature that had visited him was intelligent, patient, and extremely dangerous. But it was also curious. It had tested his defenses instead of attacking immediately, which meant it was capable of learning and adapting. That made it more dangerous, but it also gave Jake an opportunity. Jake decided to go hunting. He left his cave and began following the creature's trail deeper into the forest. The tracks led him through areas where the mushroom trees grew thicker and taller. The light grew dimmer as the canopy blocked the purple suns above. Jake moved carefully, using all his military training to stay quiet and alert. He knew he was entering the creature's territory, but he needed to learn more about it if he wanted to survive. The trail led to a clearing where Jake found the remains of other creatures. Bones and metal fragments were scattered around the area, some from animals and others from what looked like spaceship parts. This was clearly a feeding ground. Jake examined the remains carefully. Some of the bones showed bite marks from enormous teeth. Others had been torn apart by claws. But what interested Jake most was a partially melted piece of metal that looked like it had been burned by acid. The creature had multiple ways to kill its prey. That was important information. As Jake studied the feeding ground, he heard a low growl behind him. He turned slowly and saw two yellow eyes watching him from the shadows between the mushroom trees. The creature had followed him. Jake looked directly at the eyes and smiled. "Hello there," he said quietly. "I have been waiting to meet you." On the stellar dawn, the alien crew watched in horror as the human faced the galaxy's most feared predator. "He is going to die," whispered Dr. Melandra. But Captain Zixtal noticed something the others had missed. Jake was not afraid. His vital signs showed excitement rather than terror. The human was not running from the hunt. He was enjoying it. The yellow eyes stared at Jake from the shadows. He could see the outline of something massive moving between the mushroom trees. The creature was bigger than he had expected, at least 12 feet long and covered in dark fur that seemed to absorb light. Jake stood perfectly still. He knew that running would trigger the creature's hunting instincts. Instead, he studied his opponent carefully. The Shadow Maw had a body like a giant panther, but its head was longer and more reptilian. Rows of sharp teeth gleamed in its mouth, and Jake could see saliva dripping from its jaws. The saliva hissed when it hit the ground, leaving small burn marks in the purple soil. Acid, Jake thought. That explained the melted metal he had found. The creature took a step forward, and Jake saw something that made his blood run cold. The Shadow Maw's paw seemed to fade in and out of existence as it moved. The creature could phase between dimensions, making it nearly impossible to hit with normal weapons. "Fascinating," Jake whispered to himself. The sound of his voice made the creature's ears twitch, but it did not attack. It was still studying him, trying to decide if he was prey or threat. Above them, the crew of the Stellar Dawn watched in amazement. "Why is it not attacking?" asked Dr. Melandra. "Shadow Maw usually kill immediately." "This one is confused, Captain," Zixtal replied. "It has never encountered a human before. The creature's instincts are telling it that this small, soft creature should be easy prey. But something about the human's behavior is making it cautious." Engineer Koss studied the readings from their scanners. The human's heart rate is elevated but steady. His breathing is controlled. Most species would be paralyzed with terror by now. "This human is not most species," the captain said quietly. Jake slowly reached into his pack and pulled out the sonic device he had built. The Shadow Maw's eyes followed his movement, but it did not attack. Jake activated the device, and a high-pitched whine filled the air. The effect on the Shadow Maw was immediate. The creature roared in pain and stumbled backward. Its body became solid and stopped phasing. Jake had found a weakness, but the sonic device had also made the creature angry. The Shadow Maw snarled and charged straight at Jake. Jake rolled to the side just as massive claws swept through the space where he had been standing. The claws cut deep grooves in the ground and shattered a nearby mushroom tree. Jake came up running, heading for a cluster of larger trees where he could use the terrain to his advantage. The Shadow Maw followed him, moving with incredible speed despite its size. Jake could hear its heavy breathing behind him and smell the acid scent of its saliva. He reached the trees and dove behind the largest one just as the creature's claws raked across the bark where his head had been. Jake activated his sonic device again. The Shadow Maw roared and backed away, its body becoming fully solid. Jake used the opportunity to move to a new position, keeping the tree between himself and the creature. For the next hour, Jake played a deadly game of hide-and-seek with the Shadow Maw. He would activate his sonic device to make the creature solid, then attack with his improvised spears and knives. The creature's hide was tough and Jake's weapons barely scratched it, but each small wound told him more about his enemy. The Shadow Maw was strong and fast, but it was not used to prey that fought back intelligently. Jake noticed that the creature favored its right side when turning, suggesting an old injury. He also observed that the acid saliva only came out when the creature was angry or excited. Most importantly, Jake learned that the sonic device had limited power. He could only use it for short periods before the battery died. When that happened, he would be facing a creature that could phase through any attack. The aliens watched the battle with growing horror and fascination. "Impossible," breathed Dr. Melandra. "No single being has ever lasted this long against a shadow maw." "The human is not trying to kill it immediately," observed Captain Zixtal. "He is learning how it fights, how it moves, how it thinks. This is not survival. This is tactical analysis." Engineer Koss clicked his mandibles nervously. But what happens when his device runs out of power? They did not have to wait long to find out. During one of Jake's attacks, the sonic device sparked and went silent. The shadow maw immediately began phasing again, its body becoming translucent and ghostly. Jake threw his device aside and drew his pistol. He had been saving his ammunition for this moment. The shadow maw charged, confident that it could now phase through any attack. But Jake did not aim for the creature's body. Instead, he fired at the ground in front of it, using his remaining bullets to kick up clouds of the purple dust that covered the forest floor. The dust clung to the shadow maw's phased form, outlining its body even when it was partially invisible. Jake could now see exactly where the creature was at all times. The shadow maw realized what had happened and roared in frustration. It charged again, but Jake was ready. He grabbed one of his metal spears and waited until the last possible moment. Just as the creature's claws reached for him, Jake dove forward and drove the spear deep into the creature's left eye. The shadow maw screamed in pain and rage. It shook its massive head, trying to dislodge the spear, but Jake held on grimly. The creature's thrashing threw him around like a rag doll, but he refused to let go. Blood poured from the wounded eye, and the shadow maw's movements became more desperate. It slammed itself against trees, trying to crush Jake, but he managed to stay on the creature's blind side. Finally, the shadow maw made a mistake. In its pain and anger, it forgot to phase and became fully solid. Jake saw his opportunity and drove the spear deeper, angling it toward what he hoped was the creature's brain. The shadow maw stiffened and then collapsed, its massive body hitting the ground with a tremendous crash. Jake was thrown clear and landed, hard against a mushroom tree. He lay still for several minutes, waiting to see if the creature would move again. It did not. Jake slowly got to his feet, breathing heavily. His left arm was badly cut, and he had several deep gashes across his back. His right shoulder felt dislocated, but he was alive, and the shadow maw was dead. Jake looked down at the massive creature and felt a mixture of satisfaction and sadness. It had been a magnificent predator, perfectly adapted to its environment. In a fair fight, it would have killed him easily. But Jake had not fought fair. He had used intelligence, planning, and human stubbornness to overcome a creature that was stronger, faster, and better armed than he was. On the stellar dawn, the alien crew sat in stunned silence. "The human killed a shadow maw," Dr. Melandra whispered. "With primitive weapons and tactics we do not understand." "No," said Captain Zixtal slowly. "The human did not kill a shadow maw. A human proved that humans are the apex predators. We have been watching the wrong species." Jake sat down beside the dead creature and began tending to his wounds. He had won this battle, but he knew the war for survival on this deadly world was far from over. The scent of blood would attract other predators, and he needed to be ready for them. But for the first time since crashing on Korath Prime, Jake Martinez smiled. He was not just surviving anymore. He was hunting. Jake spent 2 hours treating his wounds and resting beside the dead shadow maw. His medical supplies were running low, but he managed to stop the bleeding and bandage the worst cuts. The gash on his left arm would need proper medical attention soon, but it would hold for now. As he worked, Jake studied the creature that had nearly killed him. The shadow maw was even more impressive up close. Its claws were as sharp as razors and harder than steel. Its teeth could have bitten through his helmet without effort. The acid glands in its mouth were still producing the burning saliva that had melted metal. But what fascinated Jake most was the creature's brain. When he had driven the spear through its eye, he had felt the weapon penetrate something much larger than he expected. The Shadow Maw's skull contained a brain almost as large as a human's. This had been an intelligent creature, not just a mindless predator. Jake heard movement in the forest around him. The scent of blood was attracting other creatures just as he had expected. He could see yellow eyes watching him from the shadows between the mushroom trees, but none of them came closer. They were afraid of him now. The thought made Jake laugh out loud. He was sitting wounded and exhausted next to his dead enemy, and the other predators of this deadly world were keeping their distance. They recognized what he had become. On the stellar dawn, Captain Zixtal made a decision that would change galactic history. Dr. Mel Andra, open a communication channel to the human, he ordered. Sir, she replied with surprise. We are not supposed to make contact with primitive species. This human is not primitive, the captain said firmly. He has just accomplished something that no warrior in galactic history has ever done. He killed a Shadow Maw in single combat using nothing but crude weapons and his intelligence. Engineer? Cos clicked his mandibles nervously. Captain, the regulations clearly state. The regulations assume we are dealing with normal species. Zixtal interrupted. Nothing about humans is normal. Open the channel. Jake heard a crackling sound from his damaged communicator. He picked up the device and was amazed to hear voices speaking in accented but understandable English. Human, this is Captain Zixtal, of the galactic cooperative ship Stellar Dawn. We have been monitoring your situation. Are you in need of assistance? Jake looked up at the purple sky, trying to spot the alien ship. Well, that's a first, he said into the communicator. I crash land on an alien world and aliens want to help me. Where were you 3 days ago? We were observing, the captain replied honestly. We wanted to study how your species reacts to extreme danger. We expected you to die within hours. Sorry to disappoint you, Jake said with a grin, but I'm still here, and your local monster isn't. There was a long pause before Captain Zixtal spoke again. Human, what you have accomplished should be impossible. No single being has ever killed a Shadow Maw in personal combat. How did you do it? Jake thought about the question as he looked at the massive creature beside him. I studied it, he said finally. I learned how it hunted, how it moved, what its weaknesses were. Then I used that knowledge against it. But you are so small, came another voice, this one more feminine. You have no natural armor, no claws, no special abilities. How can such a fragile creature defeat one of the galaxy's apex predators? Jake touched the bandages covering his wounds. You're right. I am fragile. I can be hurt easily, and I don't have any special powers, but I have something else. What is that? Asked the first voice. I don't know how to quit, Jake replied. Where I come from, we have a saying. It's not the size of the dog in the fight, it's the size of the fight in the dog. That Shadow Maw was bigger, stronger, and faster than me, but I wanted to live more than it wanted to kill me. On the ship, the alien crew exchanged worried glances. Dr. Melandra spoke quietly to Captain Zixtal. Captain, I am reading the human's vital signs. His stress hormones are elevated, but not from fear. The readings suggest excitement, pleasure even. Captain Zixtal felt a chill run through his crystalline body. Human, he said carefully. Did you enjoy fighting the Shadow Maw? Jake considered the question honestly. Parts of it, yeah. It's been a long time since I faced a real challenge. Most problems in space are solved with technology or teamwork, but down here it was just me against the ultimate predator. No backup, no advanced weapons, no safety net. Just pure survival. He paused. It felt good to know I still had it in me. The alien crew fell silent. They were beginning to understand something terrifying about humans. Other species fought when they had to, but humans seemed to enjoy the challenge of combat itself. Human, Captain Zixtal said slowly. We are prepared to rescue you now. Our transporters can beam you aboard our ship. Appreciate the offer, Jake replied, but I'm not quite ready to leave yet. What do you mean? Asked Dr. Melandra with alarm. Jake stood up and looked around the forest. More eyes were watching him now, but they stayed hidden in the shadows. Well, I've proven I can handle one shadow maw, but your scanner readings probably show there are more of them on this moon, right? Several dozen, Engineer Koss replied without thinking, then immediately regretted giving that information. Dozens? Jake's voice carried a note of anticipation that made the aliens extremely uncomfortable. Now that sounds like fun. Human, you cannot be serious, Captain Zixtal said urgently. You are wounded and your supplies are limited. One Shadowmaw nearly killed you. Nearly, but it didn't, Jake pointed out. And now I know how they fight. The next one will be easier. Dr. Melandra checked her readings again. The human's brain activity showed the same patterns they had seen during his fight with the Shadowmaw. He was not just unafraid of facing more deadly predators. He was looking forward to it. Human, we need to discuss something, Captain Zixtal said carefully. Your species may not be as primitive as we believed. We would like to make official contact with your government. Good luck with that, Jake laughed. Earth is probably going to be pretty surprised to learn that aliens exist. But hey, at least you'll have something interesting to tell them. What do you mean? Jake picked up one of his improvised spears and tested its balance. You can tell them that humanity just moved up a few notches on the galactic food chain. The communication ended as Jake walked deeper into the forest, following the tracks of another Shadowmaw. On the stellar dawn, the alien crew sat in stunned silence. Finally, Captain Zixtal spoke. Change course for Earth immediately. We need to warn the Galactic Cooperative that we have found something unprecedented. What shall we tell them? Asked Dr. Melandra. The captain thought about Jake Martinez, wounded but unbowed, walking into the forest to hunt creatures that had terrorized the galaxy for millennia. Tell them we found a species that does not just survive in hostile environments, they thrive in them. Engineer Koss looked at the readings showing Jake's position moving steadily toward another Shadowmaw nest. Captain, what if other humans are like him? Captain Zixtal felt another chill run through his crystal body. If Earth contained billions of beings like Jake Martinez, then the galaxy had just become a much more dangerous place. Not dangerous for humans, but dangerous for everyone else. Then, he said quietly, we need to make very sure that humanity sees us as friends, not enemies. Down on Karath Prime, Jake Martinez smiled as he heard the distant roar of another Shadowmaw. His wounds hurt, his supplies were running low, and he was alone on one of the most dangerous worlds in the galaxy. It was turning out to be a pretty good day. 3 hours later, the crew of the Stellar Dawn detected the death cry of a second Shadowmaw. They set course for Earth at maximum speed, carrying news that would change the galaxy forever. Humanity was no longer alone in the universe, but after watching Jake Martinez, the aliens were beginning to wonder if they were the ones who should be afraid.